Welcome to the Light of the World Ministry. My name is Eleazar, your host. In this video, I will try to answer this question: how did God beget His Son? So how did God beget His Son? John 3:16 reads, "For God so loved the world that He gave His only begotten Son, that whoever believes in Him should not perish, but have everlasting life." So according to this verse, God has a Son. In fact, it's God's only begotten Son. Well, there are many explanations out there that are trying to answer this question, and I'm not going to discuss all of them here in this video, although the most popular explanation by far that I came across to is this one. God begot His Son through the miraculous birth of Jesus by the Virgin Mary. However, this explanation seems incomplete, and some could argue that the Son of God already existed with God in the beginning. John chapter 1 verse 2 tells us He was with God in the beginning. He meaning the Son of God. Therefore, how then could the Virgin Mary give birth to a son that has already been existing since the beginning of creation? Colossians chapter 1 verse 15 tells us the Son is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation. My friends, I'd like to share with you the insight God gave me on how God beget His Son. Yes, it is true that the Son of God already existed with God in the beginning. How God beget His Son is explained to us by the Apostle John in the following Bible passage. John chapter 1 verse 1 to 5 reads, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through Him, and without Him nothing was made that was made. In Him was life, and the life was the light of man. And the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not comprehend it." But in order to fully grasp what this passage we just read is trying to explain to us, which is how God had begotten His Son, we must first understand these 3 points. Number 1, that God is light. 1 John chapter 1 verse 5 reads, "This is the message which we have heard from Him and declared to you, that God is light, and in Him is no darkness at all." So, why is it important to understand that God is light? This is important because light is the true nature of God, and His Son is also light, the exact representation of His being. Hebrews chapter 1 verse 3 tells us the Son is the radiance of God's glory and the exact representation of His being, sustaining all things by His powerful word. We will get back to this point later in this video when we put all these things together. Point number 2, the beginning that this passage we just read is referring to is the beginning of creation. Here are some of the verses that support this explanation. Genesis chapter 1 verse 1 reads, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth." And Psalm chapter 33 verse 6 tells us, "By the word of the Lord the heavens were made, and all the stars by the breath of his mouth. Therefore, the beginning that these verses are referring to is the beginning of creation. Besides, in the verse that follows, and John chapter 1 verse 3, it tells us all things were made through him, and without him nothing was made that was made. This verse indicates the creation. Now that we established that, let's move on to the next point. Number 3. The Word is the message or command that God sent out in the beginning of creation. Understand that this Word is light, and this Word in the beginning that God spoke is written in Genesis chapter 1 verse 3. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. Please remember these 3 important points that I just explained. We are now going to put these things together. So what Apostle John was trying to explain when he said, "In the beginning was the Word," he was referring to the beginning of creation. And in the beginning of creation, God spoke his first word. And God said, "Let there be light." And this word is the basis of the truth that we now have. So basically, with this word, God created an image of himself. What it accomplished was it created another light, an exact copy of God who is light. So when God said, "Let there be light," it created another light. It made a copy of himself because his word, "Let there be light," had no other reference for what light was except God, because before the word, there was just God who is light. So when God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And that light that was produced by his word is the Son of God. And the reason why he's called the only begotten Son is because he's the only one God produced by himself. Everything else in the creation was created through the Son. Colossians chapter 1 verse 15 to 17, the Son is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation. For in him all things were created, things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities. All things were created through him and for him. He is before all things, and in him all things hold together. Therefore, God begot his Son in his divine nature. He was there with God in the beginning of creation. He was before all things. He was already existing before time began and before the foundation of the world, and even before he and God created man together. My friends, I hope that you're getting the sense of all of these, and that the light of God, who is his Son, dwell in you. If you're still not convinced with this explanation, and I know that there are many unanswered questions that we have yet to answer, and of course the most obvious is, where is our Lord Jesus in all of these? And that is something I will cover in the next video, Son of God Part 2. Until then, My friends, may God bless you. Let your light shine.